accept. And so we have refused to sign the treaty that would put our officials, our personnel, under the responsibility of the International Criminal Court. At the same time, we are so pleased when the International Criminal Court prosecutes, identifies and prosecutes bad people that we think are deserve prosecution, but we won't let it.
I just wondered if your organization tried to adjust on that issue. Okay.
No.
Because it would make a big difference, I think.
Yeah.
I don't know if you're familiar or not, but the Globalizing Torture was a report that was just released in early February by Open Society Institute.
Yeah.
And basically, that also sheds light on the human rights abuses that take place. And this report also highlights the fact that the CIA also reached out to, I think it was 54 or 56 countries around the world to also participate in these human rights abuses, and just the extent of an atrocious mechanisms or the methods that were used to try to, elicit confessions from victims, from detainees. It was just mind-boggling.
No, that's a really interesting report. The Open Society Institute did this report to identify all the countries that were the black sites for the CIA torture program. And so they listed that and the number of people who were involved. And what's really happening around the world is that some of these countries are holding their own people accountable for participating in what we ask them to do. And that's the example of Italy, where they prosecuted and sentenced the head of their intelligence agency. So you're right, we didn't only do it ourselves, we involved lots of other countries and other people in it. And people do, as the former president of the Islamic Society of North America said, people look to the United States as the moral leader. And you've heard John McCain say this when he was in prison in North Vietnam and was being tortured. He said what made him and his fellow compatriots, the American soldiers there, survive and withstand the abuse was the knowledge that we are better than them. We have the values. They don't. They're treating us like animals, but we don't do that. And so that's why he's so concerned about this shift.
2 points. I'm constantly uncomfortable when that kind of discussion comes up, and even my hero, Glenn Greenwald's last book on the topic of how the justice system has changed in this country, so that there's actually, I forget the title of his latest book, but it's about how if you're in the elite class, you don't have to. What's it called?
With liberty and justice for some.
For some, right? But when I heard his talk about the book, he uses, the terminology to give one an impression that it was good at one time and now it's not. But there's always been huge classes of people in America who have been horribly, violently oppressed. And so maybe from the perspective of the people that you're trying to reach out to, that messaging works in saying,
it does.
This isn't our values and this isn't our that, but me as like a student of what I consider real American history, I feel like it's always been there's always been a hypocrisy in how America perceives itself on some level and what it's actually doing to huge swaths of people, in terms of violence and oppression and all of that. So it just makes me a little bit uncomfortable, that kind of language, but I appreciate the film and I appreciate everything you're trying to do, so I'm just,
Well, actually, George Hunsinger hints at that a little bit in the movie when he says that.
And then just the second point is, just this morning on Democracy Now! They covered a woman who in Afghanistan says that her son was found in a river, and she is blaming the American soldiers that are there. And so I'm wondering, how do we really know the torture is over?
Well,
and,
I think,
right. And plus we have the rendition program, the CIA rendition program that the Obama administration refuses to say he's willing to halt.
Well, there are two, let me just say that. There are two kinds of rendition. The rendition that is still going on is rendition where you have somebody who is being protected by the country in which they're living, and they won't extradite them. But so you have the Pan Am, what was it, 103 bomber or whatever in Libya,
Yeah.
and Libya won't give anybody access to him. So rendition is when you go in and you take him
Right.
and you send him to England and you give him due process and a trial.
Right.
Okay, that's one kind of
in lieu of
rendition.
extradition.
It's
right.
in, exactly,
Right.
it's in lieu of extradition.
Right.
That is what's still going on. There is also rendition for torture,
Right.
which is what was established after 9/11, where we took people and sent them to Egypt or Syria.
Right. To the black sites.
Right, to the black sites.
Right.
And I believe that is not happening. I believe the torture program has been shut down. Are there examples out there where somebody has, well, we know the soldiers urinated on the bodies of the Afghans, right? So are horrible things still happening? Yes. Is it a program like we had previously, which was authorized by the president, created by the Secretary of Defense and the head of the CIA to do an entire program of? No, we don't have that anymore.
Okay.
That is gone. Yeah.
First of all, thank you. And I was wondering, to me, this is a question of very important persuasion. I guess you said, given that this title, this huge shift in public opinion.
Yeah.
And for me, and probably for most of us in the room, it's fundamentally a moral argument. But whenever champions come forth with the arguments, then there's always that question, which is, it's wrong for the following reasons. Oh, and it doesn't work anyway, right? Which and it's true. I believe that is true. I worry that in fact sometimes weakens the argument, because it becomes this kind of this.
Well, if we found out that it did work, then would it be okay?
Right, exactly.
I agree with you.
And so
I don't like that argument either.
And it becomes this question that almost everybody uses as an oh and then.
Yeah.
Right? But so if you're down to moral persuasion, right? I get stuck between two things. One is on great moral issues like abortion, right? Like a pro-lifer really has they don't get why other people won't agree with them, right? Like it's a moral issue to them, right? And I worry that sometimes our arguments will come across that way, that we might never convince somebody because we're just arguing it's wrong because it's wrong.
I think that those are really perceptive observations. I think the fact is that when you compare it, when it's in this group of genocide and slavery, which it is legally, I mean, the international community has decided these three things are things that are so violative of the human being that they can never be committed. Then you put yourself in that argument, you say, okay, well, there are places where we could do genocide. Wait, there are times when we could use slavery. There are times when we could use torture. You know what I mean? Nobody would think we should ever resort to slavery. Nobody would ever think we could use genocide. Do you think? And torture is in that category. Because what's happened is
to me, war should be in that category.
Well, war is
So
actually
that's
different.
fluid,
There's this
you
whole
know?
notion of a just war, and I mean, it's a much more complicated discussion.
It's not
But do you
what
know
you
what I mean?
think, it's what the
There is a
international-
true morality about it, is my take on it. That there are these three categories that, I mean, there are these three acts in this category.
I wonder why rape wasn't in that.
Rape is actually in it. It has become, lately, I think it's been
See,
added.
that's another thing.
No, I think it's
Just
lately
just-
been added.
But I guess there are people who would say, no, torture is different from that.
Mhm,
Right?
I think
And the question is, how do you persuade someone more conservative who doesn't agree on that fundamental principle? Right? And
Well, that's where we get to it,
Right.
whether it works or not. That's why
right,
you
then
end up in that,
then you've got question.
exactly.
That question it's not a good question.
That's right.
Well,
And
I think, I think one answer is, do you really want to say that a government should have that kind of power over anybody? That would seem to me like an argument that conservatives should at least understand, because otherwise, in other situations and other topics, they're so against the government, daring